Welcome to HR on the Rocks, a podcast for professionals that takes you behind the closed door.
All right, Melanie, take her away.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to HR on the Rocks. And cheers, you guys.
Cheers.
White Claw.
Yeah, White Claw today. My OG. So today we're going to be discussing interviewing techniques for success, as well as giving some tips to hiring managers and candidates. So this is kind of a practical advice, real world application episode.
Finally, something meaningful, right?
Yes, finally.
Meaningful. It took us 9 episodes to get to it.
Right.
But in light of the fact that we're talking about interviewing techniques, I'm going to be conducting my own interview of sorts with Jake and Justin. So after this is over, you guys can break down what went wrong and how to not conduct an interview. I'm open to positive feedback only, so keep that in mind.
Don't break her spirits.
Oh.
Yes, please. So we're going to start this one off. Jake or Justin, either of you leap in, but it's kind of an icebreaker question here. I'm not sure if that's a technique for interviewing, but I'm utilizing it today.
Always. Icebreakers are great.
Okay, yeah. So Jake or Justin, tell me about the best, the worst, or the funniest interview that you've ever conducted. What went wrong? What went right? What did fate set up as unavoidably hilarious? I know what I'm hoping that you'll tell, but we'll see.
All right. So, sorry, Jake, I got to kick this off.
Go for it.
So, interviewing for the job where we eventually all met, I was rushing from current employer over to that employer, and because it was the middle of summer and we just wore shorts, and where we were going was a corporate setting, I had to put on a dress shirt, put on pants,
As you're
put on a
driving.
jacket. Well, no, I stopped at a hotel parking lot right across the street
So someone got a nice show.
and just scrambling to do all this. The button in the middle of my stomach fell off
That's
of the
amazing.
dress shirt.
Bing.
And I'm like, so lo and behold, I'm like, well, this is just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Go into place of business, and it was a high secure place. Y'all know that. And
Yep.
they have to come down and get you for interviews. And the manager came down and got me, get in the elevator. And they go, hey, so how's your day going so far? And I looked at it, I go, you really want to know? Yeah. And I just opened my jacket because I'd been holding my, where you keep
Holding it
extra
tight.
resumes, just looking scared. And I was like, I got dressed over in the hotel parking lot over there because we wear shorts and t-shirts, and I knew I was trying to dress up. My middle button came off, and here I am. And the interview could not have gone. I was so embarrassed, but you had to call it out because
Sure.
I couldn't sit down across from this person who would be my manager and my gut be hanging out. I mean, that's just nobody needs to see that during an interview. And the funny thing is that it came up a couple times during the interview, and at the end, it was, well, it was a pleasure to meet you. Glad you got to see me basically shirtless today. You got to see my stomach most of the time. It was so embarrassing and so hilarious, and worked out perfectly for me at the same time.
You got the job. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know why you got the job? You were real, right? I think that's probably one of the hardest things so being on the other side of that equation, right? You're the manager and you're sitting there and you're trying to decipher, like, what's this guy or gal about? Do they really have the skills that they're saying that they represent? But when you get that moment of real, you get a sense of who that person is. And so I think you handled it perfectly. that said, I would have been dying laughing on the other side.
Thank you.
It's better than literally watching. So for me, funny story. Oh my gosh. And I didn't even know how to get past it. Like, I didn't know what to say or do, so I just like ignored it and pretended it didn't happen. So this gal comes into my office. She sits down. I'm the hiring manager. And this was a mock interview. This was for an organization that Roger Staubach runs. It's called Allies in Service, actually. And this poor gal comes in, and she's a military veteran. She's transitioning out of the service, and we're doing a mock interview. So she comes up to the company I'm working at the time, and she sits down. And as soon as she sits down, we both hear this big, like something ripped and gave way in that moment. And she goes, I mean, she turns beet red. Like, she was the color of this box. Like, she's beet red, and I'm sitting there like, I don't know what to say. And so I just asked her the first question, and we went right into it. And she was so flustered that like 2 minutes in, she's like, can we stop, please? Like, yes. Do you need to go use the restroom? She's like, yes, I need to go use the restroom. And that was it. So yeah, it's that's one of those, like, she was, it was funny because it was real, and obviously it was memorable, right? It was something that, like, that candidate, out of all the people that I've talked to, which at this point, Justin, thousands, right?
Oh, thousands. Yeah.
Literally thousands of people. And she sticks out as one of the, like, holy cow, that was memorable, because like, she tried to start getting the interview going, and then she's just like, look, time out. Like, I can't do this right now.
And
I
who
gotta go
hasn't
figure
been-
out.
And you know what? We've all been there as human beings.
Sure.
It just so happens that that was during the middle of an interview. I mean, what are you going to do?
Worst timing ever, right?
And unfortunately, with that is some hiring managers can be dismissive of my situation or of the person you were interviewing, and that is something that really needs to be. We're all human.
Yeah.
Everything has happened to everybody. People have lost buttons. Stuff has happened to even them. But, there are a lot of hiring managers who expect 1,000% perfection from the day you step in the door, walk in, do this interview. And it's just not the way it works sometimes. It's just rolling with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And particularly, I think you find that in managers or leaders that are new to management or leading, right? And so sometimes that's someone who's, they're 50 years old and they're getting their first crack at leadership. Sometimes it's, a college kid straight out of college, 20 some years old, right? 23, 22. And because they have that degree, they're getting that leadership opportunity right out of the gate, and they're just not ready for it because they have unreasonable expectations of the individual. Because to your point, Justin, I could have easily looked at her and been like, no, you should have used the restroom on your way in. Like, we're going to keep going. You're wasting my time, right? I could be that guy, but why would you be that guy, right?
Yeah.
All right, Melanie. That was a good first one. This is. I'm telling you,
The ice has been broken.
We're gonna need 3 or 4 episodes for this.
Yeah,
because
4
if
episodes
everyone's like
later, we're
this-
still.
Because if everyone's like this, and it's gonna take us 8, 9, 10 minutes to answer one question. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, I did not see this heading in the direction that it headed. And I practical advice: bring safety pins everywhere you go and an extra pair of pants. I don't know.
An extra button to sew
I'll
on.
be thinking about that. Yeah, your interview.
It would help if you knew how to sew.
Right.
You just actually bring a stapler and just that right to you.
That would have been so amazing if you had like 6 staples going down right there. You go up to like the receptionist, like, excuse me, ma'am, can I borrow that stapler?
Also, very good practical advice. So we're just gonna roll right into question 2 here.
Finally.
And so with the use of virtual interviews today, what do you think the best environment is to interview a candidate in? Up for grabs.
That's a good one. Jake, you've been doing that a lot lately. I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah. So when you say environment, Melanie, you mean like what should this in the background look like their environment, or are you? How do you mean that?
Either virtual, like, is it better to interview virtually, or is it better to have the person actually physically, like, coming into the office for the
I
interview?
see.
Traditional versus, I guess, more modern take, which is what a lot of companies do now.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is it depends. And what I mean by that is this. So if it's the initial screen call where it's the recruiter talking to an individual saying like, maybe you're the right fit, maybe you're not, like, let's sort that out right now. I think that's probably not an appropriate time to have them drive all the way in, sit down in front of you, meet eyeball to eyeball. Now, that said, like if they're close, like really close, maybe that's okay. But otherwise, this is perfectly fine, right? Exactly what we're doing here. You don't have to waste any gas. They don't have to waste any gas. Like there are states that are considering and putting laws on the books that like you have to reimburse them for the gas and the time and all the other stuff. So I think doing it like this is fine for that initial call. Now that said, if they're meeting with the hiring manager or a panel interview and they're local, I think probably the higher level the position, the more important that is, right? And the reason I say it that way is that when you're sitting down and you're talking to somebody, you get a lot of nonverbal activity and nonverbal cues, and I think we'll talk about that later. But most importantly, like you get folks in the room that get the opportunity to sit down eyeball to eyeball with potentially like their future leader or someone they're going to be working with side by side pretty regularly. And so I think it really comes down to the situation. And so, again, I think initial screen call, maybe even first interview with the hiring manager, probably not necessary. I would recommend, though, that instead of just a phone call, that it is, something like this, because you do still get as much of that in-person feel as possible. But I think that it's not necessarily the most important thing. What's interesting is like I know staffing companies that like that's step one. You have to come in and sit down with the recruiter eyeball to eyeball. And so I think Justin might have a different take. Justin, what are your thoughts there?
Yes and no. First take is if you're the candidate or if you're a manager and the candidate takes your call and you're sitting there and you're doing it in your car and you don't have 20, 30, 45 minutes where you can go find a conference room or something in a hotel, or you can't find something where you can separate yourself, that is no bueno. That's just not the car. You got to be respectful for who's hiring you, right? And you got to make sure that they have your time. And you want to be valued as an interviewer. Well, you're not showing the person who's interviewing you any value, because I know I've been on it and they're driving down the road. They're like, well, this is the only time I can do it. Well, no.
Right.
No. That's
carve out some time on your calendar.
Yes, and that is important, and that is same for the manager too, right? I mean, if your first experience is going to be, and it's going to be video, then you make sure that if you have the opportunity to lock your door or you have blocked it out on your calendar, you've got to make sure that you're also giving the person you're interviewing the same respect that you would want from them. You want quiet space, not a lot of crazy stuff going on. Now things do happen, and that's understandable. My wife was interviewing somebody yesterday in our house, and I might have knocked over a coffee cup and a plate on the tile floor that and y'all have been to my house and was up on the bar and I knocked them. And you know what? All she did was, excuse me, apologies. And that happens, right? I mean, it
Sure.
just does. Somebody you're not expecting,
Just
and
as the
especially in
background,
this,
you can see
I
him.
know. Well, I had both
He's
my
running
daughters
back and
come.
forth.
Both of my daughters come running out, and they're looking at me like, "What?
What are you doing, Dad?
Mom's on the call." Yeah, I got it. No, yes, I know. So, and it was, but it was she was the ultimate professional, and just like, hey, apologies for that. And but that kind of stuff happens. And even when you're a candidate and you're doing an interview and you're doing it virtually, you don't know if somebody's going to ring your doorbell, and then
Right.
your
Dog starts freaking out.
your dog freaks out. And we've seen all the funny videos from COVID. It's just life. That's just it's part of it. So
yeah, for sure. No, I think so just to tack onto that, I mean, one of the funniest things that I've seen lately is this, and it was just during the course of the day. I called a fellow colleague, and I was just talking to them about some stuff that was going on. And as I'm talking to them, their kid runs into the room and starts telling mom about how they were just successful on the potty. It's like, that's adorable, and why don't you go handle that and call me back like when you get a few, because like those are important moments. And so it is weird, like the integration of work and life, because like life happens right behind that door, right? The door that is literally for me closed right now, right? But if my kids need something, they could just as easily walk in right now and start trying to do the hand signals like, can I go to Bobby? They're like, can I go to that so and so's house? Like, yeah, go.
I'm gonna do that next time when my wife is on another interview or another important call and she's on a video. I'm gonna go in there.
Do you want to get drinks?
Honey, I'm gonna tell her I went potty in the big boy potty.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it's better to acknowledge the maybe embarrassing things that are later on maybe considered funny than to just bypass and ignore. Okay.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to those stories, right? You're real. It's real. Like it's life.
Real and respect.
Real and respect. Okay. So yeah, Jake, you touched on nonverbal cues a little bit. So let's dig into that. What nonverbal cues do you look for when you're interviewing a candidate? And specifically, are there any nonverbal cues that are there that shows that the candidate's either interested or full of it?
Sorry, were you asking me a question?
Yeah, I have no idea what you just said.
So this thing right here, this is a huge no-no, I think, for me, right? Because like 9 times out of 10, you're either, you have some kind of like camera that you're on that's either a standalone camera or it's on your computer or whatever. And so you're talking to it, and then you see them do this, and then they're over here and they're texting or whatever the case is. Like, that's a huge pet peeve of mine. Like, we're here right now. Let's be in the moment. Let's talk to each other. It's the same courtesy you would give your own kids and your family. At least I hope you are, right? So like if you go home and you sit down for family dinner time, if you even still do that, right? And you sit down and you're having dinner, and all of a sudden you get a text and you're like, oh, what is Bobby saying? And then like 10 minutes later you look up and they're done with dinner. It's like, what are you doing, right? Why are you so distracted? Why is this so important? But it is, unfortunately, like our universes are tending to revolve around this thing. And I think that for me, that's one of the biggest ones that candidates make a mistake with during an interview, because the moment I see that, I'm like, are they going to be doing that all day at work? Like, that's the first thought. And it's just that it's not even, I try to push that thought away, but that's literally the first thought. Like, are they going to be on their phone all day? Like, do I have to worry about that now? And so, I think that's important. And then beyond that, I think making sure that, to Justin's point, like if you're in an interview setting, I mean, there's kind of a point to the fact that every time I'm wearing a tie during these podcasts, and the point is like dress the part. And I'm not implying that you guys aren't dressing the part. You guys both look professional and everything's good, but for me, like this looks professional. And so you don't necessarily have to have a coat and tie on as an individual. But I think making sure that you look presentable, you're not rolling out of bed with pajamas on. Or if you're wearing pajamas, what is it? The guy that does Shark Tank, what's his name? Kevin O'Leary or whatever. He does all of his stuff with like shorts and flip flops on. It's kind of funny, right? He's wearing a shirt and tie and then shorts and flip flops. It's kind of natural. Melanie, you want to tell us about your shorts that you're wearing and flip flops?
Along the lines of you guys' stories about ripping through clothes, maybe just make sure that if your pants or skirt is tight, that it's not too tight. Do like sitting test and make sure it doesn't rip, or bring an extra pair. I don't know.
Velcro.
Velcro?
Justin's solution, Velcro.
I like it.
Velcro.
Just thinking outside the box.
Justin, that's a good segue. Why don't you take that one? The nonverbal cues.
So for me, it's facial interaction, and especially interviewing. If there's some sort of questions that involve technology, that involve thought. If you can see my glasses, and I'm changing screens, I see reflections,
Yep.
and they will come off. I will notice that.
Yep.
If someone is sitting there and they don't have glasses on, or they do, and they're doing this, they start looking up, trying to answer something, or they're really in doubt, or they're looking down. It's just those little cues that I was taught early on in interviewing to really kind of pick a person apart and ask follow-up questions to that, and make them really explain what you're actually trying to get out of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a hallmark of a good interviewer or a seasoned interviewer, someone that is able
Fidgety, people who are fidgety, people who are, and some people can be nervous, but you've got to pay attention to all little cues.
Yep.
And in their environment, whatever's behind them, you can't judge them for it. But I mean, if they have Tom Jones, you're pretty awesome.
I'm judging you for Tom Jones. Yeah, I wouldn't have called it awesome.
Yeah, see?
Sorry, Tom Jones fans. I'm just kidding.
Okay, nice. So, final question of the day here. What do you do when you know within a few minutes that the candidate simply is not going to be a good fit?
I think it's
Best
a good
approach.
one.
Yeah.
This is a two-pronged. So I'll let Jake handle that side. But if I'm a candidate, because this is a two-way street here.
Yeah.
I have had plenty of interviews in my lifetime where they start talking and I am not one for we work hard, play hard. And that whole, I think that is, me personally, the dumbest thing ever. And they're walking you through their place and they're showing you where they play ping pong. And, oh, look how awesome this is. We got a keg over here. This is what we do Fridays.
But it's 2 a.m. and we're here sometimes.
And we're here and it's so cool. And you're like, no. To some people, that's not appealing at all. And especially people who might be seasoned. And, I have many years ago walked through and they literally did that. Show me their ping pong table, a fridge full of beer, and all this stuff. And I was like, this isn't for me. And they were going around and, and I just stopped and said, I'm sorry, this isn't the right environment for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is not, because they may be upset that they took the time, but they will look back and actually appreciate the fact that, hey, and on the interviewing side for me too, I've had that as well. This is not the type of culture I want. This is not the environment I want, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to that end, I think, as a hiring manager, I tend to challenge the notion. A lot of managers will say, and the data is out there to suggest that it's true, that they think that they can make a decision in the first 30 seconds, right? So I have participated in so many interviews over the course of my career where I'm on the hiring manager side or the recruiter side. I'm the company. I represent the interest of the business. And I have that initial reaction where I'm like, my gut says this is a no. And it's one of those things that because you see that statement that within the first 30 seconds so often, that I try to listen to that, right? In my gut, do I feel that this is the right candidate? but so many times, not every time, certainly, and I wouldn't even say most times, but there have been enough, and we're talking like hundreds of times where I'm talking to the person, I have that initial reaction, and then we get 10 minutes down the road, I get them to loosen up, and then they start telling me about their expertise in that field, department, whatever, and it's like, wow, this is the right individual for the role.
Sure.
And so, I think, so I'm going to leave the bias side of that alone, because like there's a phrase out there that will drive me up a wall more quickly than any other phrase when it comes to the hiring process. And that is the candidate the right fit, or is this culture the right fit, or are they the right fit for the culture? And really, that's, from my perspective, that's just code word for bias. In other words, like, do they look like me? Do they think like me? Did we have a fun conversation about sports? And so I'm going to hire Bobby because I feel like I can talk sports with Bobby or Susie or whatever.
Sure.
And so that's all. I think let's shelf that piece for later, because I think that could be a whole episode in and of itself. But I think the most important aspect of that for me is that, like, if in the first 30 seconds or even the first 2 minutes you don't feel like it's right, press forward as the manager a little bit further. And if you get 5 minutes in, so one of the first things that I always try to do in the call is I try to gauge like compensation, because compensation, despite how many people will tell you, well, it's not the biggest factor, it's not the only factor. Yeah, pretty much is. I've been doing this long enough that, like, if we get to the end and you love my company and you think that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but we can't make the numbers work, you're not going to come here, right?
Jake, what have you heard me say before? Oh, it doesn't matter? Okay, well then I'll pay you $6 an hour.
$6 an hour, right?
Well, no, I'm not taking $6 an hour. Okay then.
Exactly.
Then it
Exactly.
matters.
So let's have a real conversation about compensation, because I think that is probably like the single largest point of, I don't want to say friction because that's not the right word, but like point of departure for candidates, where they're like, yep, no, this isn't the right fit, right? In other words, like, my financial situation is such that I can't afford to take a job that's at $20 an hour or $50, whatever it is, right? And so you've got to have that conversation earlier on in the process. If it's not if it's not in the middle or toward the beginning first half of the call, you certainly better do it by the end of that first call, because the worst thing you can do, from my perspective, as a hiring entity, right, as a company or recruiter or whatever you are out there, is you go through this entire process. You get all excited about a candidate. They get all excited about you. You're ready to get down on a knee and propose, right, and say, hey, will you marry me, and basically spend most of your time with me all day, every day? And then you're like, oh, by the way, like, the offer is $60,000, and you're like, the needle on the record scratches, like, what? 60,000? Like, no. Market for this role, because candidates have the internet now. They're savvy, right? They have all these different sources to be able to say, like, generally they know what the price range is for a role. And so, you're like, wait, what? You just offered me $60K for a job that's at market at a minimum $100,000? Like, absolutely not. You're crazy, and thanks for playing, right?
Yep.
And so I think that is a critical conversation to get right early on in the process. But anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay.
Melanie, we could do this all day. Do you want to go like 2 or 3 hours? What do we want to do?
Yeah. I think, you know what? Let's do a two-parter here. Let's follow up next time. And this has been good. I think you guys have reinforced my fear of my pants ripping when I sit. So that's great.
Be careful with that one.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We'll see you for part 2.
That's right. Go out and make an impact, right?